where you just have to trust that. I'm a massive believer, and it's worked for me mostly, that when you throw yourself off the edge, something catches you. I have not, my jury is out on what that something is, and you know, whoever's listening, there'll be a million different kind of descriptions of that, but I found that to be true, that when I've just gone, let's go, things have moved into play.
Hello, beautiful people. On today's podcast, we have the infectious creative Matt Jardine. Matt is a martial arts teacher, podcaster, and an award-winning author of the books The Hardest Path, A Journey Outside to Answer the Questions Within, and How to Be a Buddhist Millionaire, 9 practical steps to being happy in a materialist world. What I personally love about this conversation is Matt's way of engaging you in self-exploration with wit and humor. We speak about his 1,400-kilometer pilgrimage in Japan, where he endeavored to answer the question, is life limited by time and money? We discuss the absurdity of how people work to save money to take a break from work, and how life is about trust and action, the importance of letting go of your fear and control, and the importance of making a decision and taking that first step. Or as Matt says, just get on and do it. Please enjoy this conversation with the lovely Matt Jardine. Welcome, Matt.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Matt. I'm very excited for this conversation today. So, Matt, where I would love to start is with a quote from your book, The Hardest Path, A Journey Outside to Answer the Questions Within. And you shared, I took an interest in the Shikoku 88 temple pilgrimage because I saw it as a way to test myself. Making this 880-mile pilgrimage, I knew I would experience types of trials and hardships that I've never faced in my 48 years of existence here on Earth. The Shikoku pilgrimage is a journey of self-discovery, as well as challenge to push yourself to your physical, mental, and emotional limits day after day. It is a grueling trek, and when the pilgrim completes it, he will have a very different way of viewing life. So Matt, where I would love to start is for you to briefly share just what a pilgrimage is and why you chose the Shikoku pilgrimage, if I am saying it right, as a journey of self-discovery.
Phew, that's a big old subject right there. All right, so let's go with why I picked Shikoku first. So you know Paulo Coelho, the author of The Alchemist, right? Yes. Well, his first book, people think The Alchemist was first. His first book was called The Pilgrimage, about him walking the Camino. And when I read that, I can't remember how long ago, right? But I read it and I thought, wow, something about that idea of pilgrimage, spiritual journey, because that's been forever, right? People have walked a spiritual journey. They prayed, but they've also moved, okay? So I thought, I want to do a pilgrimage. I don't really want to do the Camino particularly. That's been done a million times. And because I've been in martial arts forever, particularly Japanese martial arts, now Brazilian martial arts, but Japanese martial arts. So it made sense to me that I thought, oh, I'd like to do something like that with a Buddhist-ish background. And Shikoku is essentially the holiest of the Buddhist trails for the Far East. So I thought, that's it. It's going to be the 88. I'm going to do that. And then I started just dreaming about it. I don't know why. I had no other connection to the 88 at all. And then I booked a flight and I decided to go. So that's why the 88. I think it was very serendipitous when I look back at it. And then the concept of pilgrimage itself it's an interesting one, used forever. A walkabout in Australia, in the outback, whether it be going to Mecca, Lourdes, the 88, there's something about, there's a map, I've seen your Instagram stuff, there's long walks and there's kind of ultra marathons. That's one thing. But there's also something about being on your own with a sort of spiritual subject somewhere else that brings an added benefit to it. Does that make sense?
It does
We do the
sense.
same amount of miles, but there's something knowing that you're on this kind of spiritual journey. So the 88 particularly is a circular pilgrimage. You start at Temple 1, you go all the way around the island of Shikoku. Japan is 4 big islands, essentially. You go all the way around, and that symbolizes your whole life lived in short. So what you see on that cycle, the ups and downs, the ins and outs, the light and dark, the rain and the sun, is you living your life lived in whatever time you take to do it, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And so you kind of, and because there's nothing else to do but walk and look at how you react to life, you get to see your life lived in short. And so you learn a lot about yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally. And I always say, if I could recommend anything to anyone, at least do not necessarily Shikoku, but do a pilgrimage of sorts. And for me, at least, it was life-changing.
And going into that pilgrimage, did you go in with expectations, or did you intentionally go in with no expectations?
That's a good. I had no idea what I was doing. I literally had booked the ticket, told my wife at that point, I'm divorced now, but told her that I have to do this, I'm going, and then got on a plane with all I knew about it was a guidebook in Lonely Planet. It was one paragraph about Shikoku, and the rest was just handing it over to the heavens.
Wow.
And I think that was, for me, part of the magic that had to happen. You just have to hand yourself over to whatever you call that, right? You hand yourself over and go, well, let's, come and get me.
And what was it sort of back home that inspired you to kind of book this ticket with not a whole lot of resources and sort of go on this path of self-discovery?
Mundanity. That's an awful thing to say, right? Isn't it? As a parent, sitting here as a parent of 2 and saying that life is mundane, you should be like, take those children away from you, you terrible father. But the point is, most people are frightened to admit that a day-to-day living is dull, right? And there's this kind of little agitation going, of course I love my family. Of course I love what I'm doing. I was teaching tennis at that point, so some of them are, the richest and famous in the world. I had loads of different stuff, but it was just like something nagging that there's more, right? And you bury that for a long time until eventually you think, what can I do to find out what that more is? So actually the gray and the mundane is the very thing that made you look beyond that and think, could I, is there something else? And do I have to go away to find it? And yeah, that's really what sparked that kind of daily grind. And of course, bringing up a young family, there was never enough money. There's never enough time, firstly, in between football training and ballet and rugby and taking them to school. And there's certainly never enough money. So part of the subtext to the trip was, can you go on an adventure, a spiritual adventure, without enough time or money, right? So many people say, I'd like to do A, B, C, D, but I can't because I haven't got the time or money. So I thought, well, I want to do this, and I don't have the time or money either. So the idea was, if I could do it, then I could prove that time and money essentially were sort of human-made limits rather than actual things. So yeah.
So that was sort of the reason behind why you decided to do, I think it was around 1,400 kilometers in 30 days. And
30
to my
days,
understanding, you only had sort of 200 and something pounds behind you.
Yeah. So you really went on scant time and money, exactly. And that was the reason to push it into that time. I couldn't be away that much longer. And as I say, just to show that you don't need time and money to have adventures or do what you need to do. Now, that does require you to then have another currency, like an invisible currency, which for me was stupidity, blind faith, or whatever you want. Probably a bit of both.
Blind faith's more romantic.
Yeah, we'll go with blind faith. That's much more creative. But essentially stupidity, but where you just have to trust that. I'm a massive believer, and it's worked for me mostly, that when you throw yourself off the edge, something catches you. I have not, my jury is out on what that something is. And whoever's listening, there'll be a million different kind of descriptions of that. But I found that to be true, that when I've just gone, let's go, things have moved into play. And it's certainly not me moved into play. I don't have the ability to construct the things that work. So I just sort of throw myself and we'll see what happens. That's a little bit what this trip in Oman is like. Sherry and I we've been together now forever, but 12 years or so. But we just looked at each other and said, should we do something? Should we go away? And just, I got a couple of novels to write. She wanted to teach in the Middle East. So we kind of got rid of the house and we went.
Love it.
So it's that kind of just go, see what happens.
Mm-hmm. So on this idea of let's go, I'm really intrigued. Like when you get to Japan, particularly, I'm always like very interested on sort of like the first night of this pilgrimage. Like what's going through your mind as you sort of embark on this sort of journey of self-discovery?
So I was so naive on this trip that as I'm getting off the plane, as it touches down, I ask the air stewardess, do you know where the 88 temple pilgrimage of Shikoku is? thinking that this is something that all people know, right. You just assume, all Japanese must know this spiritual Buddhist pilgrimage. She's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, okay. But it all started from there, literally having no information. And this is the thing. From then on, I started to run into people who happen to know. Like in that first one, I just thought, I don't know what I'm going to start walking out of the airport left. And then I started bumping into people that one would take me here, one would take me there, one would take me to a train station until I ended up at Temple 1. And then I'm thinking, well, it's a circular pilgrimage. Walk straight, you'll end up back at 88. Wow. It really was that naive and raw. So then you're just thinking, okay, well, we'll see whatever the heavens give us. If I'm meant to have this, if this is meant to happen, I'm not really a fatalist, but we'll use that phrase. If this is meant to happen, then I'll get round. If it isn't, well, then back home and the grey is the grey. So yeah, it was like that.
And this kind of plays into a concept or a lesson that was really important to you in this book, was the importance of just making the decision in itself.
Yeah. I mean, that's the opening of the book. And that's something I decided. We all know that. A journey of 1,000 miles begin with a single step. And I actually say in the book, that's actually not entirely true. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the decision to make that first step, because that is actually in the decision are the seeds of success. Like I would argue that as soon as you have made that committed decision, and by the way, for me, a committed decision is something that you feel through your gut. When you haven't made a decision, you're a bit tense and and you're still talking about it. And shall I do this? And you're not sure. It holds in your shoulders. But a committed decision, whether you have any idea how it's going to work, it sits somewhere deeper in you. Your stomach relaxes and you're like, I don't know if this is going to work and I kind of don't care, but I've made a decision. That's what I mean by a committed decision. And in that moment, boom, there's magic. Or I call it magic still, but there is something that moves on our behalf. And the result then is it's done. The job is done. And that's what I found to be true. And then kind of you start meeting people you never would meet. People message you, you bump into someone, you hear something, you read something, you read a line of a book that you've read 1,000,000 times and you've never seen that line. Then suddenly that line comes up. You're like, I'd never seen that line before, and that's a weird thing. And that comes from that first decision to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I love this concept of sort of making a gut decision. I've been exploring it, and one sort of definition that I loved is, to tell the difference between whether you're making a mental choice or sort of a gut decision is, in your mind, you'll have more than one choice. In your gut, you'll just have that one sort of option that you can make that decision of. And I felt that was very true, because I feel like when we have these tendencies to overthink about things, decisions that we need to make in life, it really seems to be that we're in that capacity of sort of in our mind, in our prefrontal cortex, going back and forth. But it's really when you sit still and sort of get back in touch with that inner knowing, that I feel like every time I do that, there's always something that sort of weighs heavier than all the other things.
I agree with you. But here's the thing, right? Here's the thing, and this points to the slightly off-kilter dark side that I play with. Once you get success in that, you know, and you've had these great things, there's a tendency for the brain to try to kind of the prefrontal cortex to try and recreate that.
Right.
So
yes,
then
I do
you
agree.
start to go, oh, I'm having a new inspired, you know, Shikoku thought, and you turn out, oh, that wasn't that at all, and then nothing works. And that's a kind of sneaky ego-based tactic, right? Isn't it? Where actually it's not faith-based. You start to steal, and so we have to guard against that, because the kind of ego brain does sneak and go, oh, I see how this intuition works, and it makes you think you're then making these deeply intuitive choices where you're not at all. You're just trying to recreate the wheel. I notice that sometimes in myself, and usually then those projects just absolutely bomb. They just do not work at all.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think for me, it really is that sort of getting in touch with the body response, I guess. Like, when we talk about these gut decisions, like I genuinely do feel it sort of around that area of my body. So it's to kind of like really realize, even though obviously we're making these decisions like through our mind, that it is certainly in touch with, different parts of our body. And as I'm sure you're aware, the gut can be, sort of referred to as the second brain. So I think it's interesting, and it's explorative relationship. I think it's to each individual how you sort of get in touch with that inner knowing.
Yeah. Do you think that women are more intuitive than guys? I know that's very generalized, but that's something that is often, I hear a lot kind of on the scene.
I haven't thought a lot about it. I'll just preface with whatever I'm going to say next. To my understanding, I feel like it's difficult, and this is certainly something that I am exploring, is kind of this like biological male-female kind of construct. And I think how I kind of prefer to speak about these things is kind of in relation to energies. And it's more of that feminine energy that I find is more of that intuitive energy. And some of my male friends that sort of have maybe a tendency to kind of be more tapped into the more feminine energy over their masculine energy, to me, seem to be the ones that are more intuitive and more connected with people.
That's a good point. I like that. Yeah. So as not as a gender, as an energy within a gender. That's a really good point. Yeah. Like a sort of the yin yang type thing, the more yin side. That's an excellent point. I like that. I'm going to think about that once this is done. Yeah. That's a much better way than it being, men are more, women are more intuitive than men. Actually, you're right. It's the kind of feminine energy in someone. Yeah. Good point. Like that. I'm going to be stealing that for sure.
Well, I mean, I still need to, reflect on it, but I think
give that some more thought.
As like a societal construct, maybe it is. That's why, women in evolution have had to kind of depend on that more than men. But, as human beings, I would kind of like to say that, intuition is a very important sort of part of surviving. And that I think, men certainly have the capacity to tap into something that I think is very part of being human.
Yeah, no, I agree. Nice.
So we spoke about the importance of sort of, a journey begins with, a step. 1,000 miles starts with a step. And, I know that this is important to you in the sense of when you make that decision, the next sort of part in this is to take the first step, and then is to take another step. And I would love for you to share how you incorporated it into this pilgrimage, because I mean, to an extent, it's an experience of endurance. I think, to my understanding, you're walking a marathon and a half a day. I think some days you were walking night and day because you were kind of getting behind on that schedule. I would love to know sort of your mindset behind being able to stay with your goal of doing 1,400 kilometers in 30 days.
That's a great question, actually. And the good thing about a pilgrimage is there's only one thing you have to do, and it's take literally the next step. Especially in a circular pilgrimage, because you just go, well, what if I turn left, keep walking until there's nowhere left to go, you're back at Temple 1. And so then you just then have to steel yourself to keep that next step. And I met, so I don't know, in the book, it's Hajime-san. Hajime is a guy, again, one of these guys who just appeared like this sounds a little bit extreme, but it was a little bit Obi-Wan, Kenobi-esque. He's here, this guy who stayed with me for 3 days. Essentially, he walks the pilgrimage. He lost his family to a car accident years before, and he just walks the 88. And he's one of and he was there, taught me what I needed to, and then just disappeared. It was the weirdest thing. But anyway, he would just say one step, and that was it. Just the next step, the next step, the next step. And so when you forget, when you're falling apart, when you think this is too hard, physically, mentally, when all the things that come up emotionally, you just, what have I got to do? Put my boots on. I can hardly walk. Well, it's unlucky. Off you go, because you got another step to do. But I think that then is just a symbol for the whole of life. Take what I'm doing now, writing full time. It's the same as writing a novel. Oh, writer's block. I can't. Well, you've only got the next word to worry about. So crack on, stop whinging, stop going on Twitter, #writing community, I can't get my book finished, and sit down and write the next word, right? But isn't that true? I can't get my business, can't get the funding. Well, that's okay, because you don't need to. You only need to sit down and do the next thing. And then those next things build until not suddenly, that's incorrect. Eventually, you find yourself at whatever the goal is, Temple 88, novel finished, business started, and you look back and go, that was a collection of tiny steps that I just got on with and stopped letting, social media know I can't do the next step. Crack on. And then it's done. And then suddenly you've got an experience behind you. So yeah, the one stepping is very important.
And how important has mindfulness been, whether it be, a pilgrimage or writing? How is that kind of impacting, your sense of achievement? Meditation,
I know you've used mindfulness there, but it's been important to me. I've been meditating since about 17. I was speaking to someone on my podcast about this the other day, actually. But anyway, the point is, got beaten up when I was 15 or 16, nothing major, not some traumatic, that's why my nose is slightly bent. But anyway, it stays in your mind. But after that, I started carrying a knife for a while till my brother said, what are you doing? You're going to end up in jail. Anyway, The point is, it led me to a place called Rigpa Meditation Center in London, where I learned to meditate. It was a 6-week course initially, Introduction to Meditation with Sogyal Rinpoche. Very good. And I've been meditating every day ever since. So meditation is a really important part of my life. I don't know what magic it does. I just know that I'm better for it than without it. But on a pilgrimage is kind of like a forced meditation, because there's something quite rhythmical about walking. You kind of drop into this state. And also there's nothing else to do. Pilgrimage, take away all the mystical stuff, is a very long, boring walk. Right, that's actually, if you take away all the other bits, it's like there's nothing else to do. So there's a point where you drop into this kind of mindfulness state, and then sometimes that state is so deep that you start to kind of access different parts of yourself, but you're so involved in it that you don't know you're accessing it until you go, have I been walking literally 14 hours and it felt like 20 minutes? Or is that the moon? Oh, I thought I'd only... little things like that. But so mindfulness and meditation is a big part of pilgrimage and of my life, definitely.
And along that pilgrimage, because mindfulness for me, in my own personal experience, is really sort of, being in the present moment and tapping into that sense of inner peace. Was inner peace something that you felt frequently throughout that pilgrimage, or was it sort of just, split moments in time that you sort of connected with that space?
Yeah, no, inner peace was not something you will necessarily get from a spiritual journey, because sometimes mindfulness can be misunderstood to being that deep quiet is peaceful. Not necessarily. Sometimes that deep peace is incredibly chaotic and violent.
Right.
With mindfulness, what you're doing is rather than that chaos coming up and you avoiding it, you're staying with that chaos. So there will be some of the days, right, I'd be walking and I'd be in the most foul mood, like nasty. And Well, I took a video blog which was turned into an internet series, and on those episodes, it's just me bitching at the camera for 20 minutes. Not hugely entertaining, but that is exactly what we're talking about. Because what happens is in that quiet space isn't necessarily peaceful. Sometimes you're looking deep, right? Like with your guest in the last episode, talking about kind of childhood trauma. Sometimes you get, I'm not talking about my childhood trauma, but you get stuff that you usually ignore is right here.
Yeah.
Now, that isn't always kind or peaceful, but the difference then is there's nowhere to go when you're walking on pilgrimage. So it stays with you. So you have to watch it. You're like, that's interesting. I'd forgotten about that. Or I thought that about that, but actually I don't. And that's the beauty. Now, those days are not pleasant, but they're often the most useful. It's like pulling a raw tooth. You don't want to do it, but you kind of got to get the roots out. So, and then though, they would often lead to a few days of clarity and peace after, until you start to get to the next level of trauma or whatever that needs to come up.
So throughout that experience, did you genuinely feel like you were able to process some things that sort of were underneath the surface, sort of back home in your everyday life?
Yeah, I really wasn't that aware of processing anything. I had one goal.
Yeah.
Keep walking. If I can't finish this pilgrimage, right, in the time, money limits, then this is how catastrophizing this was. If we're supposed to be unlimited, then I should be able to do this in limited time and money, right? Otherwise, all this stuff that we're doing is nonsense, right? Is new age nonsense, and we're all talking rubbish. So if I can't do what I've done, then essentially, then I prove that the universe is not unlimited, and we are stuck to a 9 to 5 of grey. Now that is a terrifying thought to me. So I just, what can I do? What had to make? Keep walking, and you will know at the end if you are unlimited or not. So I didn't really even think about processing. I just got to keep walking. That's life, right? You just got to keep going. There will be no big sign saying, yes, it's true, you're really unlimited. Yeah, great, it's all great, be positive. You just got to keep going, and you'll find out whether you are or not. So that's all I could do. I wasn't even considering where it was processing. I was just walking.
So on that theme, what are your reflections about that question?
Well, spoiler alert. For those who
if you feel like sharing.
yeah. Spoiler alert. I did finish with time and on kind of time, money, budget. So there I was like, wow, it happened. And that's why I wrote The Hardest Path. And some of the things that fell into place to make that happen in the writing afterwards was like, wow. I could not orchestrate the things that worked to make that work. So at that point, my belief in an unlimited universe, I know people will kind of balk at that idea, but it's my interview. I can believe what I like. But at that point, I realized actually, wow, we really are unlimited. So, but which is why then the second book came, right? This is not a plug for the books. My point is it was an ongoing journey, because the idea with the 88 is you start at temple 1, go to 88, you actually come back around to 1 again because it's a circle. But then you take that lesson. In Buddhism, it's called coming down from the mountain. There's no point in having all these insights if you can't take it home and use it in the day-to-day and help others, right? So my point, universe unlimited, blah, blah, blah. All the time limit constraints are in our own head. Crack on, one step at a time. There's the lessons. Off you go. Fine. That's me and my spiritual journey. Well, how do we translate that when I come home? So when I came home, I'm starting to think, I'm still hearing the same people moan about their days.
Right.
So I'm thinking, I wonder if I could take the same laws, that I learned on the 88 and apply them to work. Because what I was still hearing, people go, I haven't got enough money. And so that's when the idea of the Buddhist millionaire came about. It started with a question I'd say to guys after training: if I gave you £1 million, or what, $1 million's not that much now, but whatever you think is a lot of money, right? If I gave you $1 million, would you go to work and do what you're doing? And 8 out of 10 of them would go, no way. Right. I would do I'd be a drummer or I don't know, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So then I'm thinking that's a huge amount of time wasted. So can we apply the principles of the hardest path to build and do work that we love, but also makes money, which was the idea of how to be a Buddhist millionaire.
Absolutely love it. And I wanted to I wrote something down here. Where is it? I think you said or you wrote, I've got it down here either way. The absurdity of working for countless hours to earn money, to take a break, a holiday from it all. I really loved I loved that when you wrote that, because it made me think about my own personal experience in life. And, when I graduated from university, I went into corporate work, and even throughout university, my pattern was always I did uni and then I'd go traveling. I did university, went traveling. When I went into corporate, it was I would work for however long I had to, then take a break. And I used to do temping work with all the intention, because I knew that I could leave jobs whenever I wanted to leave jobs. And when I read that, it really sat home for me, because, I've progressed in life and I've fortunately been able to make decisions that are more aligned with what I'm passionate about and what I enjoy doing. But you saying this, it made me think of my friends that are still in this experience. They may get 4 weeks off a year and they're constantly saving for this holiday that they're going to take off to take a break to then, very quickly get back into the work that they don't enjoy. Can you share more about what you learned about people being in that experience, and kind of maybe some supportive, words or reflections for them to start thinking about how they can get themselves out of a situation like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And absolutely. I mean, what do we spend? A third of our work at life, a third of our life at work, sorry. Mm-hmm. And you're right, to kind of just stack the effort for time off. Let's say you're squeezing 5 days you don't like for 2 days you do, if we talk about workday week and the weekend. I mean, that's a huge, I don't know, I'm not a numbers guy, but someone brighter than me would tell me that's a lot of numbers, work doing something you don't like for the time that you haven't.
Right.
And that seems to be a massive waste. So then, and I speak about this on the Buddhist millionaire scale, right? At one end, the far end, we have the kind of the broke creative. I'm doing art, meaningful work. I love it. I'm not making a penny, but I love it. Right. And then at the other end, we have the kind of, and these are cliches, of course. We have the, rich corporate banker who's making loads of money, but I know kills puppies for fun. Right. And my question was, can you have both? Mm-hmm. Can you have a meaningful, alarm goes off in the morning. Ideally, this is what I wish for me and for everyone else. Alarm goes off in the morning and you go, I cannot wait to get up and do this. Oh, and by the way, I make a lot of money doing it. Is that unreasonable? So then backing up to my hardest path idea, thinking, well, if we'll already prove to myself that the universe is unlimited, mm-hmm. Okay, it's only limited by the questions you ask of it. So what's my responsibility? Ask better questions. So for those who might be kind of doing the grind. And in fact, my first guest on my own podcast, like you, was in the corporate world. She was one of my karate students and made that break. Same thing, working. And I just said, look, what would you want to do? She actually does coaching, life coaching, et cetera. I said, just do it. So for those who might be struggling, firstly, ask yourself, what in an ideal world? And as soon as you say that to someone, they'll say, it's not an ideal world. Yeah, I have built fun. Totally. Let's just pretend for half an hour. Let's just play make-believe for half an hour, right? If it was an ideal world, what would you do? So firstly, they have to get over the hurdle of not already stopping themselves. So that in itself can take ages, because a lot of people go, I don't know, because I've forgotten, they won't say this, I've forgotten how to dream.
Right.
So that's your first step. Like as Simon Sinek says, find your why. I know it doesn't work like that. Fine. What would you do if all things were kind of, crazy as we say they might be? All right, now let's start from there, because that is, as we spoke about earlier, that's kind of the decision. Once you know what you would be, you're going to feel, that's what I'd like to do. I've always wanted to be a drummer, write a novel, whatever. Boom. Once we've got that, things will then start to move. And then, of course, the next step for me, some people won't like this. It's just a little bit too crude and a bit too set. Get on and do it then. Stop, off you go. And then just, how? one step at a time. So then I'm always referencing back to the hardest path. What did I do? What did I do when I didn't know? Just walk one step. What about after? Don't worry, you haven't got anything to worry about after that step. Just do this one. And that's what I would recommend to everyone. And what happens is then you see enough people. It's what we're doing with our podcast, right? You interview enough people who are making this so-called crazy new age magic work that you start to go, oh, there might be something in this. Right. I'm going to give it a go myself. And then you go, oh, it's actually, they're not as crazy as we thought. There is something to this. Some people, of course, will explain it more scientifically. Some people a little bit more kind of airy-fairy like me, but there's something to it.
Absolutely love that, because I assume, the question that you get all the time is, Matt, I've got my sense of what an ideal life would be for me, but I've got not enough time and not enough money. And I love this idea of just taking this one step, because it doesn't mean quitting your job today. It doesn't mean even quitting your job in a year. Things take time depending on what it is that you want. But I have heard you use the example even in terms of, writing. It's like, okay, well, get up an hour earlier, half an hour earlier, even every day, and just start to put a few words to the paper. Stop making excuses. Like, everyone has, even 5 minutes. If it genuinely has to start that small, at least you're making that decision, like you said, and you're taking that first step.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what as well is that once you've made a decision, let's use the novel one, because it's such a long-term thing to do. And a lot of people have that as a goal, right? Once you've made the decision, your only job to do is make the decision, right? You don't predetermine how you would do it. Your job is, I'm going to finish or write this novel. Fine, long-term prose, whatever. Then what you'll find is you start to, this will weirdly happen. Maybe it'll work like this, maybe not, but you'll suddenly find yourself waking up 5 minutes early. You won't need to schedule. You won't need to Google Calendar, get up 5 minutes earlier so I can squeeze in 20,000. Right? You will suddenly find things happening. And this is weird. And this is the point about decision making, that the answers are already in your decision. They're already unfolding from your decision. You'll suddenly find yourself waking up earlier. Or that Netflix series that you used to watch till 10:30 suddenly is not that interesting. So where are you going, your wife or husband? Oh, I'm going to bed early. I'm not in the mood. Boom. Those things. So you almost won't need to find the solution. You just make a decision, be prepared to walk whatever that one step is. Who knows? It could just be a physical step. And it's really weird how things start to shift. Boom, boom. You'll go online and Domestika comes up on your feed as oh, look, how to write thrillers. I don't know. But you'll see all these things that you probably, when you're in the middle of it, you won't realize. But if you wrote them down or you look back on them, you go, wow, there's kind of some sort of, I don't really like the term guidance, but I haven't got another word, but guidance coming that comes from that first decision. And it's weird, but it's magic.
And in my own coaching, I talk a lot about co-creation, the balance of faith and action. And we're talking sort of about this action-orientated sign. But I know that having a sense of trust is really important to you. And I loved in your book, you kind of described it as letting go of fear and control. Can you please speak more to that, Matt?
Yeah, I can speak to this because I'm utter control freak.
I think most of us are.
Do you know what I mean? Because I, obviously I think I'm the God's gift and I can handle it all and I can hold the world up with my fingertips. But that's what I was saying earlier, that once you have these successes, something kind of the darker side and you go, oh, that was all me. I'll just try and do that again. And so for me personally, my ongoing, not battle, but journey is just to keep the trust and the faith that got you to where you are has nothing to do with you, the processes that made it happen. So just trust to let it happen again. And that's that constant checking in with myself. Am I carrying this on my shoulders or am I letting it flow through me? Beautiful. And for me, weirdly, I know when I'm working too hard because it shows up as migraine. I literally am floored. I'm sent to bed, can't see. I go to bed for 2. And at that point, I look at Sherry, my wife, and we both go, probably trying a little bit too hard there. But when things move easily, and that's for me that's the constant thing is, okay, just relax, let it happen, trust, because there's always this voice going, well, it happened on the 88 because it's Japan.
Right.
Okay. Well, and you know, oh, well, it happened on your first novel because, I don't know, Fred was it. There'll always be this reason, but actually it's the same process. Just chill, relax. It's no different. Faith and trust work. And when I say faith, by the way, I'm not necessarily, or I'm not talking a religious faith. It doesn't have to be a faith in a thing. It has a faith that the universe is doing quite well, thank you very much, holding itself together without Matt Jardine. You know what I mean? As I sit here now, my liver's doing one of 500 processes. My heart's doing its thing. Kidneys is regulating kind of function. And I have no idea what's going on. So I think it's probably going to be able to work out the next draft of my novel.
Beautiful. And as you live, you know, you sit there in Amman, living a beautiful life with your girlfriend, and you're writing, and you're truly, I feel like, you know, living your truth and certainly living what you're preaching. What is a lesson that you've learned in life that you wake up or you live throughout your day being grateful for?
It's funny you say that. I think being grateful for reminding myself to be grateful, actually. It's really easy in goal-driven people, which you sound like you are. I certainly am. I love to get stuff. I like it. I'm a goal-driven geezer. But actually, just to get up and wake up and go, right, what we have now, what I'm looking at now is a byproduct of the decisions we've made, and just taking a second to go, thank you for whatever forces, for me for making that decision, for the forces that conspired to make it work, even with this podcast, you know, someone messaging it and you go, thank you for those opportunities, and taking a moment just to take it all in. So being grateful for, remembering to be grateful. I'm a big believer, I'm getting soppy as I get older, but being grateful for being grateful is really important.
Love it. Thank you, Matt, so much for this beautiful conversation. I've certainly learned a lot through, you know, your own pilgrimage, and I've certainly got a lot of reflections to be had from everything that you're sharing through coming on the podcast and your writing. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
So on a final note, Matt, I would love to ask you, what does it mean to you to be human?
Oh, no, nothing like a small question to finish the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Especially to a writer.
Throw me to the dogs.
Someone that's very self-exploratory probably feels like the world is on your shoulders, but I would say let it go.
Nice one. What does it mean to be human? Oh, okay. Yeah. Here we go then. So I think for me, what it means to be human is to have the opportunity as a human to express the universe in a way that the universe couldn't do without humanity.
Beautiful.
But equally, that humanity couldn't do without the universe in this kind of symbiosis. That for me is what I think it, and that can be for good and bad, by the way. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But that I think is for me what it means to be human.